Good morning, everybody. It's Nicola Bird here from the Floral Project, and this is the day we've all been waiting for. So this is the kickoff Cut Flower Patch Weekend, January 2023. And I know you're all really impatient to get sowing. So that's what this weekend is for. So let's begin. The time is finally here. Now, a couple of things I want to say before we get started. Firstly, we are taking a little bit of a risk, I'm going to tell you, by starting to sow now. Ideally, we want to start around the middle of February with the seeds that we're going to be sowing. And that is because of the day length, which I'm going to explain in just a moment. Now, I have started seeds in January, towards the latter part of January, exactly as we are doing now. And they have been brilliant, right? They've been really, really good. You know, there's gardening rules and then there's breaking the gardening rules. So that's my caveat before we get started. The day length where I am here in Chobham right now is 8 hours and 37 minutes. When we get to our catch-up Cut Flower Patch weekend, which we're going to do in February, we're going to do that on, I think it's the 18th and 19th of February. The day length here will be 10 hours and 12 minutes. So quite a bit longer. Right. And I looked up Aberdeen as well, because I know we've got a lot of people here in Scotland. Right now, your day length is 7 hours and 45 minutes. And by the time we get to the 18th, 19th of February, you're going to be on 9 hours, 58 minutes. So pretty much 10 hours as well. All of us will be on about 10 hours. Now, you'd think it might be but it's too cold to sow. And actually, the temperatures don't change very much wherever you are, like in a normal year. Between now and the middle of February, actually, they stay pretty similar night and day through January and February in a typical year, which I know we haven't been having typical years. So the reason that we wait till February isn't necessarily because of temperature, isn't at all to do with temperature. Actually, it's to do with day length, right? So day length and also the time at which we can actually plant these plants out into the garden. So most of what we're going to be sowing today, you'll be able to plant out at the end of March. So actually, if you do start sowing really early, you know, you could end up with massive, great big plants that you're trying to keep going inside the greenhouse. It's not time to plant them out yet. We actually shouldn't have that problem sowing now. But day length is the important thing, right? So as soon as our seeds germinate, they've got everything they need with compost and keeping them moist and warmth to germinate. They have everything they need in there, but as soon as they germinate, light is what they crave over warmth, actually. So light is what they really crave, and that's what we're missing at this time of the year. So we are taking a little bit of a risk, but we are going to really, really look after these seedlings like no other seedlings that you'll probably look after. But the reason I'm doing it is because A, I have had great success sowing at this time of the year. And B, I know I can't stop you, so let's just do it together. But I will say, please don't sow all of your seeds. Excuse me, hold some back, because we are going to be doing a catch-up Cut Flower Patch weekend, very similar format to this one, in February, 18th and 19th of February. Put the note in your diary. On that weekend, we will sow any seeds that you've got that say Hardy Annual on the packet, right? So with our Floral Project seeds, you can always find it here. So if you are part of our flower club, which is why you're watching this, if you have got any boxes from August, September, October, November, December, January, right, any of those boxes, and either you didn't get round to sowing them because life got in the way, I get it, or you lost a load in the cold snap in December, or the cold snap that we've had in the last week, or you just want to sow more of them, or you had like some empty cells where some didn't germinate and you've realized you want more of a particular hardy annual plant, then that is that weekend in February. Hold off until then if you can, and we'll do them all together. That'll be a massive sowing weekend. Okay, so today we're just doing the January seeds, and we're not doing all of them. We're just going to do a few because this is kind of like an experiment for you, okay, if you like, but I know you want to get going. So here's what you need, right? This is what you should have with you today. So so seeds, right? Get your seeds ready. And the first thing I do, I'm a bit, well, maybe it's because I'm creating the videos, but like I open them, I tear open the little packets. These are all ready to go. And then I have my labels. do not forget your labels, right? And you can cut up yogurt pots, a great tip from one of our Floral Club members. If you don't want to buy more plastic, I get it. Or make sure you've got labels. And then also make sure that you've got some kind of permanent marker, for example. Otherwise, if you do them in pencil, you won't be able to read them come the time you come to plant things out. You won't know what they are. Or sometimes even in Sharpie as well, it fades and you can't see what it is. But you can get these on Amazon or at a garden centre, just a garden marker pen, right? Any will do. And then the next thing you need is something to sow into. So, for example, I noticed this in our bin. So I washed that up like it's a yogurt pot, right? And you can punch some holes in the bottom. And then that's a lovely little sowing tray, right? For a perfect amount of sprinkle of seeds in there. You don't need to get fancy, right? I have got today, so you can sow in a seed tray like this, right? And you can get half-size ones of these as well, or a windowsill, like a long, thin windowsill version of these. You can put compost in and sow straight into those. Or what I prefer to do, and I'm using today, are these module trays. So this is a 40-cell module tray. I'm going to sow one sow in each cell, and I'm going to pop it in here to support it, so that when I water it, the holes in the bottom of this will allow the water to drain out. And then, because I'm germinating these on my kitchen windowsill, I have another one with no holes in the bottom, so that I can pop it all in together like that. That will then sit here, like so, and until the seeds start to germinate. So I'll talk to you about that in a moment. But the other thing I have is a food tray as well. So I've got this, has just had tomatoes in it. I've punched some holes in the bottom for drainage. Very high tech. I'll put it on a plate. And this will be for one of my seeds, right? So what you want to do is you can sow, and the other thing, of course, I've got is, which has been warming. So please don't sow into frozen, damp, solid, cold compost straight from the garden. This, excuse me, has been sitting next to my radiator for the last few days. So it's kind of room temperature. It's not warm, but it's not freezing cold, right? So give it a couple of days to warm up. Do you know what I was going to do if I'd forgotten to do this? I'd have balanced it on a hot water bottle for a couple of hours. We really do like doing men. None of your fancy heat mats and all that kind of thing. Like, we're all about saving money and saving the environment and saving energy. So use a radiator that's already on, use a hot water bottle. There you go. So you've got compost as well. And I use Silver Court by Mellagrow. Silver Grow by Mellacourt, which is the peat-free compost. So that's everything that we need, right? So I am going to show you sowing into here as well as sowing into here. So I'm going to do that. And I also am going to sow some seeds into another one of these, like a separate one of these as well. And I'll explain why. So here's what we're going to do. Now, if you do you can look in the January Secret Garden, and you will find some instructions there about how to plan your garden. That can be great to do, because then you know how many seeds you need to sow. Otherwise, you just tend to sow absolutely heaps and you don't need to. So have a look in there, or the Planning the Grow to Give Garden Workshop, and you'll have a rough idea of how many plants you want. If you have no idea, sow 4, or no, actually sow like 8 or 10, but don't sow 200, right? You don't need to sow that many. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be sowing, right, my stocks, my statice, and my scabiosa, everything beginning with S, right, is going to go into this tray, right? And I don't need to sow a whole tray of these because I don't need that many plants. So I'll show you how I'm going to sow those in a minute. Those are all going to go together. The gypsophila, I'm going to sow in here, because I want to show you what to do when you're just sprinkling the seeds across the surface of a soil if you don't have a module tray, and sprinkle across the top of that. So I can show you how to do something called pricking out, which is when you have to separate all your baby seedlings out. When you sow in a module tray, you don't have to separate out your seedlings, right? You've only got one seed and it's growing happily in its own little block. When you sow en masse in one of these, you have to do something called pricking out. And so I'm sowing these in here so I can show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm doing that one a bit differently. Although you could equally as well sow these in a module tray. Okay, you don't have to sow them separately. And then I'm going to sow my Cynoglossum in a separate tray. And the reason I'm going to do that is because that is our seed that is a little bit different in that it needs dark to germinate. Okay, the others need light to germinate. These need dark to germinate, proper dark. And so, and they take a long time to germinate. These are going to be indoors for longer. So I am sowing them separately. So if you've got something separate you can sow in, do that because you're going to need it, right? If the worst comes to the worst, you can sow in a flower pot like this, right? The only reason not to is because look at all that compost that you don't need. When you sow into a module tray, it's shallow. And so you only need a little bit of compost to get them germinating. So without further ado, let's get started. So all I'm going to do, so you can see here, I should have a tray, but I haven't. So I'm literally doing this on the kitchen table because I want you to show you, you don't need fancy greenhouses or any of that stuff. And I'm going to fill up my seed tray. I'm trying to think how many I need. So I'm going to sow out of each of these. I think I'm going to sow 10 of each. 1, 2, 3. So I only need my seed tray filled up to here because luckily Matt is away at the moment, so I can make as much mess as I like without any frowns and clean it all up and it'll be like it never happened. What's the point of gardening if you can't get your hands a bit messy? So now why am I only filling like part of the seed tray is because when I sow my seeds, I'm going to sow these two with one seed, these two with a different type of seed, and these two with a different type of seed, right? That's just the way that I'm going to do it. So I've got 10 of each. I would probably sow 8 of each, but I'm saying 10 of each just because the tray is made that way, right? So it's got 5 cells, so that makes 10. So if you end up with extra seeds, I'd rather sow a little bit extra. Now, what you want to do is when you've got your compost in, is tap like this because you'll be surprised how much you need to just top up some of the cells. The other thing I would say as well, if you can be bothered and you are very good and well disciplined, sieving your compost is a really great thing to do, right? Because you see, you can end up with these big lumps of like bark and stuff in here. And you don't really want that when you've got a tiny seedling pulling its way through. Now, I've got a bit casual in my 3 years of growing, my old age. So I tend not to sieve, life's too short. But I just pick off the biggest, most problematic bits that I can see, right? So this is quite more than usual, actually. Right, so there we go. Sometimes you get the ones, sometimes you open a whole bag and it's just a bit more like that. Right, so here we go. So I'm just going to smooth up the top there. There we go. This is our lovely seed tray to be sowed into, right? So this compost is quite dry because it's been in the house. It's been in the house over the, next to the radiator and stuff. So it's not moist like if it's freshly out of the bag. That's fine because we're going to water it afterwards. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll start with the scabiosa, okay? So this is one that is a bit risky because this one tends to get a bit funny about being sowed this early. It prefers to get sowed a little bit later. So I'm going to sow some now. And this is an experiment, right? And if these ones don't germinate, or if they take a while to germinate, or only half of them germinate, I'll sow some more in February. No big deal, right? I'm just sowing some now in the hope that I don't have to sow any more in February, so I've got more time to sow things in February. More space to sow other things. So be careful when you tip them out that you don't tip them all over your compost because you don't want to accidentally sow them in other seeds. And now look how beautiful those are. These are some of my favorite seeds. These, and wait till you see our cornflowers as well if you have those. So what we're going to do, by the way, if when you join the flower club you did buy any of our cornflower kits or our sweet pea boxes or anything like that, sweet peas you can start now, but personally I would save everything now apart from these until the middle of February, and then they will get off to a rip-roaring start. Okay, so I'm literally just popping one on the top of each cell. Now, sometimes with the Flower Club, we'll sow seeds that need light for germination. We don't have any this month, so you don't need to worry about that. We can sow them all in the same way. So I'm just going to drop them all in. There we go, one in each. I'm going to pop the rest of them back in the packet, and this is when you can risk tipping them all over your compost, like I just did there. Then I'm going to put my little label in so I remember what those are. Okay, so now in the next one, I'm going to sow my statice. Now, statice is actually what we call a half-hardy annual. So this does not like the frost, these, okay? So the reason we're sowing them now is sometimes these can take a little while to get going. And I'd love to have these earlier in the summer if we can. So these ones we just have to really be a little bit careful with when we're making sure that they kind of stay as warm as they can, right? We know that they can't handle any frost. So, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to do with them afterwards. So you can sow 1 or 2 in a cell. And if you are sowing, so these are so tiny, you can just hook them up with your fingernail. But I'm going to put just a couple in each because you've got a lot of these seeds. So I'm going to put a couple in each cell. And then when they pop up, I will just pull out what looks like the weaker one and just leave one to grow on happily on its own there, unencumbered by the other. If you're sowing into a seed tray, try and sow them still like this kind of distance apart if you can, right? So you can see it's like, I don't know, 3 fingers width apart, because you want your seeds to have plenty of room to germinate. Now we're going on to stocks. And if you've got questions about any of this, just post them in the comments below and I will come in and I'll be checking in here today to answer your comments and your questions. Nearly forgot to put actually make sure you label that this one is the apricot, because in February we've got a white one of these coming. You don't want to get them confused. And so these are my stocks. Okay, so these, again, I'm going to try and do 2. Oh, a bit clumsy today. Try and do 2 in each cell. I'm not, I've just done 5 in that one. But there you go, there's more chance something germinate. When they're tiny like this, it's really hard to just get one in. But it's fine, because we will literally, if you get like 5 little seedlings in here, we'll just pull them out so that you leave one. Okay. So that is this tray ready. And what we're going to do now is just really gently, and this is where you don't want huge lumps if you can help it, is just really lightly cover over. Try not to knock the seeds out of where they're placed if you can. And we're just going to sprinkle some compost gently over the top. You want to try and make sure each of them are covered, but not a massive, great big hoofing lump of wet compost over the top. Yeah, it's like fine powder. Just to sprinkle them over like this. See, this is one of the most nice, relaxing thing. Not when you have to talk, talk while you're doing it, but normally it's one of the most nice, relaxing things to do, and also a great thing to do with the kids. If you don't care about relaxing and you're more interested in fun, do it with the kids. Right, so now I'm just going to gently, again, without trying not to move the seeds, I'm just gently pressing the compost down, okay? Because you want the seeds to have contact with the compost. You don't want them sitting in the middle of a big air pocket, which is why we tap the tray to start with. Okay, what I will now do to water this is I'm not going to get, can't see me on the seed tray. I'm not going to get a watering can and water this, okay? Because what will happen then is it will knock all these little seeds to one side. I will get, and I haven't got one here to show you, but you know what I mean, like a sports cup. This like flower farmer would just like roll their eyes at me here. But we've only got we're not sowing millions of seeds, right? We've got like this little precious tray here. So I will get a sports cup and I will gently hand water each of these cells to make sure that they are moist. Now, you want your compost to be moist, not damp, especially at the moment, okay? So don't drown your seeds because they will just rot, okay? If they don't germinate, it's because they've rotted because you've overwatered them usually, right? So really, probably less water than you might think, just so it's damp. And you'll start to get a feel for this, like how much? It's really hard to say. It depends how high your heating is. It depends how damp your compost is. It depends, you know, how heavy-handed you are. Like, it depends on lots of things. But what you'll learn, what you'll start to learn, you'll see that sowing seeds is all about learning, right? And you're going to kill a lot of plants. I'm going to tell you that right now, right? So no surprises when it happens. But you're going to get a feel for what it feels like to have a tray of compost that is well watered, like perfect amount of watering. So get used to picking your trays up and just weighing them in your hands, because that's how you'll know. You can't always tell by looking at the surface, but that's how you'll know, hang on a minute, this needs a little bit of water. I can feel that even though this has been inside for a few days, it's still pretty heavy. It's only going to need a little bit of water. It's not really dry compost, okay? So what I will do now with these is, if you've got the Floral Project Planner, make a note of when you sowed them. If you haven't, make a note of when you sowed them on a notes app on your phone or something, because it's really interesting to notice like how long things to germinate, how successful they were, how many you got to germinate, any notes of like, oh, definitely overwatered those guys, or should have put them on a different windowsill or whatever, right? So what we're going to do with these now is I'm going to place a plastic lid over the top. Now, this is when you find out that your seed labels are too tall, right? So, so what I will probably end up doing is lying my seed labels down because they are too tall for my plastic, right? So that's fine. I still know what's what. So you need one of these, right? And okay, I'll tell you what to do if you don't have one, but if you can get a plastic lid like this, this is great, because what this means is it will trap the moisture and make a humid environment in here. And given that we're sowing inside and we're going to have these on the kitchen windowsill or any windowsill, your warmest windowsill, excuse me, what you don't want, because the heating's on, because it can be quite dry at this time of the year sometimes, you don't want this like just drying out, the surface of the soil drying out. You want to keep a moist, humid environment, and we do that by putting this lid on, right? So this lid will stay on until the first seeds start to germinate in here. Okay, when I can see I've got some good germination going on, and it will be that some of the seeds will germinate before others, right? So, but as soon as, and I'll show you when I take my lid off, but when you can see them starting to germinate, you do want to take this lid off so that they've got air as they're starting to grow. But for now, I will water these, right? I'm not just going to leave them like this because they do need some water to start with. These probably won't need watering again before they germinate. And my guess is if they take a couple of weeks, sometimes seeds can take 2, even 3 weeks, right? So if they take that long, they will need another water. But at the moment, I'm going to take these, water them, and I'm going to put them here because this is probably my warmest windowsill in the house, because obviously the oven goes on and off and there's always people in here. The sun comes in through the window and it will warm this nicely. And these will sit here until they start germinating. And as soon as they start germinating, they will go outside under cover. So what that means is they'll go into my mini zip up greenhouse that I've got, because I don't have a proper greenhouse. You've probably already realized that. Or if you're growing in plastic crates, if you're growing in plastic, you know, some people are putting their seeds into white plastic boxes that you can get from B&Q or Homebase, and then you can just put the lid on at night and take the lid off in the day, and it acts like a mini, you know, portable greenhouse. They will go outside as soon as they germinate. The biggest mistake that new growers make is leaving these on the windowsill too long and then posting a picture of like, help, my seeds have gone all long and leggy, which means they go tall and pale and lean over to one side. So they just haven't got enough light inside. Even if it's a conservatory, they don't have, it looks really light, right? But there's not enough light in here. They need to be outside, not outside with no cover, right? Because they just won't last, but outside and in in a greenhouse, right? So you can germinate these outside straight away. You could just put that outside in your greenhouse and leave it. The germination will be far more erratic. It will take a lot longer, and you can't kind of get the joy of seeing when they first germinate. So I always germinate inside. You can also save these seeds, by the way, and sow them like March, April time directly into the ground. So all good, right? But I like to sow them here. I like to nurture them, mother them, look after them, and then we'll put them outside together. This way I can keep an eye on them, right? Now, if you've sowed your 3 different types of seeds separately, so say you've got one of those windowsill propagators where you can pull the cells out, right? If the one set of seeds starts to germinate and the others haven't, just put those ones outside, right? Or if 2 of them start to germinate, just put those ones outside and the other one inside. If you've done it all together, like I have, you need to put it outside as soon as the first set start germinating, even if the others haven't yet. And the others will catch up, they'll just be a bit slower. But what you're going to learn about gardening is about slowing down to the speed of flowers. I know I'm going quite fast this morning in terms of how I'm speaking, but you know, we're going to slow down, we're going to be patient. We are not going to mess around when these start germinating. We are going to get them straight outside. But if the others take a bit longer to germinate, so be it, right? We're going to be fine with that. So the next thing I'm going to do is sow the gypsophila, okay, which I'm going to do in this food tray. So I'm going to get some compost. Now, you look at this food tray, right? It's quite deep. You don't need to, the temptation is just to fill it to the top, right? But you don't need to. They only need a little bit of soil to germinate in. And, you know, once they're tiny seedlings with their first 2 true leaves, we're going to be pricking them out. So they don't need masses of depth. And we don't, why spend more money on compost? Once this has been used to germinate seeds in, you can't use this compost again. So you don't need to fill it right to the top. Okay, let me just tell you that. So every inch of compost saves us money, right? Who doesn't want that? Right, so mine is kind of, I don't know, 2-3 centimeters deep, maybe. Let's do another handful for good luck, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, tap it down, make sure there's no air pockets in it. I'm gonna get my gypsophila. I'm going to tell you what to do if you don't have a lid in a moment, because obviously I don't have a lid for this one. And so I'm going to get these seeds. And again, I'm going to save some, right? So I'm not sowing the whole packet. I'm only going to do like that many. You think that many? That's never going to create a garden full of flowers. Awesome, isn't it? Seeds, just incredible. So I am going to just sprinkle these as widely apart as I can. If you have a touch of control freakery, of course, pick each seed up and plant it at exactly the right spacing. Right, so I have just sprinkled those as widely as I can across that. Okay, all I'm going to do with those actually is I'm just going to give them a little tap like this. That'll annoy you if you spent ages putting them in the right place, right? Okay, so I've just given them a little shake. That will have covered over the seeds. If you want to, if you don't want to do that because you've placed yours carefully, just sprinkle a little covering over. Right, again, I will water that with a sippy cup. Done. Now, because I don't have a lid for this one, what I will do, I'm going to put it on its plate so when I water it, it doesn't destroy my windowsill. I will put cling film over it, right? Or a clear plastic bag. Remember, they don't need lots of light at the moment. They just need the warmth and the moisture. So I'd put a bag over it. I would like a see-through bag if I can, because I want to notice when these things start germinating, right? And that also, you guessed it, will go on the kitchen windowsill. The other reason that needs a lid over it, otherwise my cats will dig it up. I have to start again. There's a lot starting again in growing flowers as well, which you might have realized when you look in our Facebook group. So again, I know you don't know what all of these seeds are, right? And what they're going with the flowers and how they're going to turn out. Okay. Trust me, you're going to love every one of these. Okay. You get to find out. That's part of the fun. And of course you can Google it if you want to, or you can look on the website. If you want to look in your flower guides section in the Secret Garden, and you'll be able to see pictures of each of these flowers. Okay. If you want to look them up. So the cynoglossum, I'm going to do a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do with this is I've got another module tray here, and I don't want to sow a whole tray of these because I don't want a whole tray of these. So again, I'm probably going to do, I do like these though. These are beautiful. I want some of these for the borders as well. So I'm going to do sort of 15 of these. So I'm going to fill up my seed tray. Let me just stand up so I can get to it. And because these ones need dark germination, we are going to do them a little bit differently. See, I'm a great believer in making do with what you've got as well. So as you'll see in a minute. So I tap those down to make sure that everything has got enough. And then, so really what you want now is something called a dibber, which I haven't brought in from outside. So I don't have a dibber with me. So I'm going to use the end of my pen. So I'm just going to make a little hole in each of these. Doesn't have to be massively deep. I can get my Sonoglossum seeds and luckily these are kind of big enough to handle. And these are such a beautiful blue color. I'm just going to drop one into each cell. So if you are sowing straight into a seed tray or a yogurt pot, again, just make a hole, make them, drop two in there, so clumsy. Make a hole, drop a seed in about this distance apart again. Oh, I do it on camera, that's the problem. And then, so my label is going to be too tall again, isn't it, for this? But I'll show you. So what I'm going to do with these is, again, just cover them over now. Just by tapping the side, kind of covers them over for you. Make sure that, again, just a light press down. You don't want to like shove them down, light press down. So I am going to only Sonoglossum in this one. So this is a bit of a wasted tray here. I am aware of that. So you can actually even like just cut these if you wanted to, right? So you've got like segments of trays, but I'm happy just to grow it like this. I don't have a lot going on in the greenhouse. If it was February, I would not want empty trays like this because that's kind of a waste of space, if you like. So I'm going to water this, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them again still on the windowsill, right? But I'm going to put a lid over like this that's no holes in the top because these need dark to germinate. Okay, so I will put those on the windowsill like that, and every day, even though they probably will take 3 weeks to germinate, I will check and see. And as soon as I see anything, you want to get that lid off. Okay, and again, when they start germinating, any of these, when they start germinating, you want to get them outside. So now is your time to think about, if you haven't yet got like, where am I going to put them outside? This is your time to, you sow your seeds, you know you're going to have like a week or so, right? Some of them will germinate very quickly, but this time of year, pretty slowly. Some like these can take 3 weeks, even 4 weeks. So don't stress that they haven't come up straight away. You haven't broken them. As long as you don't overwater them, they won't rot. They'll just take their time and they'll come when they're ready. But now your next job is to go and either buy a mini zippy greenhouse and weigh that thing down, please, so that you don't have the experience that some of our growers have where they topple over in the wind. Or you can get tiny little plastic greenhouses that if you've got a really small growing space, or to get a like I say, a white plastic cartons from Homebase or B&Q that you can put outside the door when it's time to go out. And then if it gets really cold, you can bring them back in. That is what the one caveat I will say with these, which we don't normally do at all, but given that we've only got a handful of seeds on the go at the moment, what I will say to you is that if the temperatures go like they have last week and unexpectedly dip and get really, really, really cold, these tiny seedlings, I would bring them in during the night and I would put them out somewhere sheltered where they're not going to get too cold in the day. I would not have them outside overnight, even in a greenhouse at the moment when they're just germinated. It's too much for them. The other thing I'll say is when you do move them out into the greenhouse, If you've got the time and the inclination, you can move them out gradually. So you'd move them out in the day, bring them back at night. You do that for a few days to get them used to being outside if you really want to care for them well. I tend to just put them out there. But then what you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure that you leave the lids on for a couple of days when they've moved outside, just to protect them. And then you might take the lids off in the day and put the lids back on at night. Have some horticultural fleece handy. Actually, no, you won't need horticultural fleece for these, because if it gets really cold, we're going to bring them inside. You do not have them inside for days on end, right? They can probably manage one day inside, and then they're going to need to get more light than that. So literally out on your back doorstep during the day, even if it's cold. If it's snowy, put the lid on, wrap them in fleece, but like get them outside for as much light as possible. So it's going to be like a, you know, this is hard work sewing at this time of the year, but you're all keen to start, so why not? So that's all we need to do. And then what I will do is I will show you the seeds as they start growing alongside you, right? So you'll be able to see what we're doing. So we're all doing it together. What I ask from you is that you sow your seeds today and then post it in the Facebook group, right? So I can see, look, I've sown my seeds. I did it, right? So that I can see that it's done. I'd really love to see all those pictures flooding our feed today. I will be back at 2 o'clock with a garden tour. So just come back here and you'll see garden tour. I will make sure that all the posts over this weekend are tagged with, I'll tell you what the tag is in the comments, because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but they'll all be tagged. So if you can't sew along with us this weekend, no problem. You can catch up any time from here on in. You can start these seeds, okay? And if you're really overwhelmed and busy, just put them to one side, and you can do these when we sew together in February as well, okay? So don't worry. Right? When you get your February seeds as well, don't sow them straight away. Just save them and wait for that weekend. We'll all do them together. It's really nice to be doing this with everybody else. So hopefully that's helped. You figure out, just understand what you need to do to sow your seeds to start with. Any questions, post them below. I'll see you back here at 2 o'clock when I'll be showing you around the garden. And then 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we've got our live Q&A call. So I'll also put a link to that in the comments. So if you haven't registered, register for that and come. And I'll be talking much more about the giving side of the floral project, like where you can think about who you might give your flowers to. I know that seems like a million miles away, but it'll come before you even know it, and answer any questions you might have as well. So there we go. The 2023 flower growing season has begun. All right, look forward to seeing all your pictures in the Facebook group. Take care. Bye.